Hello, podcasters.
Welcome to episode 58 of the Twinsies podcast.
We has a table.
Yeah, if you are listening and not watching, our podcast studio is now like 90% complete.
Yep, we got a table. We got a rug.
Very gorgeous table. We have a rug.
Thank you to our listener Rob for slapping this guy together.
We have painted walls. We have fill lighting.
Yeah,
We're missing a boom stand and something to make our walls less boring.
Yep, and some cable management, probably.
Cable management is the worst. You've ever seen, you've gone on Reddit to that, there's a subreddit that's like cable, I don't know if it's called like, I can't remember what it's called, but basically it's a subreddit devoted entirely to like really efficient cable management systems. It's like an IT nerd subreddit, and they have like, it'll just be like dozens and dozens and dozens of cables that are all like perfectly in line and like running like, up the wall and stuff. I don't know why I just thought of that, but
I went to the Container Store for like 5 minutes, and they always have interesting stuff, and they had this system.
Store?
Yeah, and they had this little thing that you like zip up. It's like a wide like jacket, and you put a thing in it. You slide the zipper that kind of opens it, and then you slide the zipper down. It'll like allow it to go in. Then you slide it back up, and it stays in. So it makes it from like it's like bundling 3 creeks into a river kind of thing, and it just looks like really clean and like up to a Y. So look cool. We can maybe do that.
Get something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but
what's new in life, Dan?
Cable management. Well, I'm Uncle Dan.
Oh,
shout out to Annie and Ryan having
congrats
a little baby, our first Blewett grandchild. Of course, I am unmarried, and my brother's unmarried, so probably remain the first grandchild for a while. But yeah, it's exciting. Theodore Joseph Arroyo, 7 pounds and some amount of ounces and some amount of inches. But
it's largely irrelevant.
Yep. Good looking kid.
This is what I know we've had this discussion before, but I think now I have, well, I know for a fact, I have 6 nieces and nephews, and it's like before
you've habituated by now.
Well, I've habituated, and also like before they get to a year, I'm just like, meh, because they're just like, they're not even human beings. They're just like lumps of goo. And then, yeah, because they don't have a personality. They can't talk. They can't even like see you for the first couple months. And so I'm usually like, hey, give me a ring when they're old enough to play, because then I'll, but
this is fair. Yep. They're little lumps of cabbage.
Little lumps of cabbage.
Whatever you want. But, yep. So that's new. Happened yesterday. So it's exciting.
That is exciting. That is one day after my sister's birthday. Her birthday was on Sunday, the 21st.
Good.
Yeah.
And that was actually their exact due date, which is weird.
Oh, really?
Which my mom's like, that's so rare that happens. And probably is. But then again, if they're going to guess a date, it's always going to be plus or minus. But it's probably the equal percentage of time it's going to be the exact date.
33% early, 33% late, 33% on the dot. Or maybe it doesn't work out like that.
Well, it's not like it'd be just those 3 days. It could be any within, a couple weeks. But you'd think any given day between...
It's equal probability.
Yeah, it'd be a 7% chance of any given day within a 14-day window, right? I'm not crazy, right?
I would think so. I don't know.
I think it's just very, do you think the doctors, have a pool? They're like, yeah, I got it.
Or, if you do a bunch of jumping jacks, it, falls out earlier.
But that's kind of cool. They, nailed the due date. So.
Yeah, doctor a little extra swag in his step.
I don't know what his name was, but Dr. Cabbage.
Dr. Cabbage. Yet again, nailing it.
Yep. So that's the big thing that we got going, I suppose.
You just want to dive into what I want to talk about today? I didn't tell you what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, mystery podcast.
So
spooky season.
The other day, well, yesterday, in fact, I was squatting, and I was in a bit of a rush, so I didn't warm up. And
you hurt yourself, didn't you?
I did. And so I had been tight because I had increased my volume quite a bit. And I was squatting 385, and I went down for my 3rd rep, and I went to come up, and my old quad had a little tweak. And so,
did you get back up?
No, I had safeties up, which kids out there always have safeties up.
Yeah.
So the pins caught the bar, and it was fine. But, well, I guess I have a couple things to say here. First of all, we are always sticklers about using safeties for that very reason.
For that exact reason. You see it all the time on social media. People are just like, I'm good, I'm cool, I'll just walk it out. It's like...
Well, and our buddy Mitch, I remember one time Mitch was in here squatting. He was doing back squat, and he wasn't using safeties. I was like, Mitch, why don't you put some safeties up? And he's like, I don't use safeties. And I was like, why don't you use safeties? And he's like, well, because it like it forces me to get the bar up. I have to get the bar up if we don't have safeties, and I'm like, yeah, that's but not you can have all the willpower in the world, but if your quad goes out, your bar's coming down. So if I had not had safeties up, it would have been very ugly. But I was at the bottom of the squat, so the distance between the bar and the safeties is probably about 5 inches. So safeties caught the bar. But I mean, it's an injury that I've had a couple of times, like here and there. It's like little hamstring pull, little quad pull, and it was my fault because I didn't warm up, and I had kind of had tight quads anyway. But it got me thinking about how it's funny how often as strength coaches we sort of act as physical therapists, which you and I are both very conscious of our scope of practice and staying in our lane. That's a phrase that gets tossed around like between the medical / strength training community of orthos and PTs and ATs and strength coaches, that's like you have a particular skill set, so execute that skill set and try to stay out of what other people do. But at the same time, it's also kind of a blurry line, especially when you're talking about strength coaches versus physical therapists, and especially when you're talking about if there's some sort of, let's say there's a movement dysfunction or there's pain of some kind, very often it can be traced back to a muscular either imbalance or weakness or whatever. And so it's like, okay, that's where the line between physical therapist and strength coach kind of blurs. But over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I've done a lot of reading on like injury treatment. So once you have like a soft tissue injury, like a pull or a tear or whatever, how you recover it. And I know you have dealt with a vast array of injuries. So I want to talk today about how you might, or we might recommend an athlete treats like a soft tissue injury versus, in my mind, what kind of like conventional wisdom is, which is you ask like any person on the street, like, hey, when you tweak a quad, what do you do? And it's RICE, right? Rest, ice, compression, and elevation, which is a very old method for injury treatment. And I know you get asked this question all the time about like icing a shoulder or icing an elbow.
Yeah.
So I guess before I go on my little rant, like if a kid, okay, let's say a kid throws, well, I guess that's just two different conversations here. So let's say a kid throws, 90 pitches. Is he icing the next day? Or let's say he has soreness of some kind. Is he icing? Like, what are your thoughts on icing an arm?
Ice is only the thing if you're hurt. Like if you have pain, like you tweak your quad, you ice it to keep the inflammation down and to keep the swelling down. But at the same time, like ice is kind of like, it's like police tape keeping the cleanup crew out of the area. So, and
that's really what I want to get to.
That's why I'm not like a huge fan of ice, especially if you're not hurt, because just like let your body do its thing. And it's like angry because you used it, but the blood flow and all that stuff should be the thing that really takes care of it.
And I think a lot of people, especially because we just have a ton of volleyball players and softball players and baseball players that ice after games and stuff. And it's like you said, if you're not really hurt, it's doesn't really serve a purpose. And I would argue that it doesn't really serve a purpose at all, which we'll get to here in a second. But I think most people just end up using it because it's a numbing agent. So it's like, if you're kind of uncomfortable or you feel a little bit of pain after a game, it's like, okay, ice it and that pain will go away. But like you said, it's only really a temporary measure in terms of pain relief. Like that, if you're sore or whatever, that pain's going to end up being there anyway. So it's like not really that effective of a tool. And the thing I want to talk about today is that idea of RICE, of rest, ice, compression, elevation, is very old wisdom. And now what I think it's recommended a lot. And again, this is, I guess I would preface this by saying this is my personal opinion. And
this is me talking.
This is me talking now. So it's like, I'm always like, I always try to tread lightly because it's like, oh, like that's not your job as a strength coach to like tell someone how to rehab an injury. But here's what I would tell you. The way, let's say you get, like in my case, I have probably some muscle fibers in my quad tore, right? So there's damage in the tissue. So the way that your body reacts to that is there are kind of like 3 stages of tissue healing. So the very first thing is inflammation, right? So it's where swelling occurs and you get a rush of fluid to the site. And specifically, this is blood and then a fluid called lymph, which is like this clear fluid that has white blood cells in it.
Which is, fun fact, that's what you do after you tear your quad. How you get off the field, you limp.
Yeah. Oh, I'm limping.
Great joke, Dan.
I got a bad limp.
That joke is sponsored by Lock of Love Coffee.
Yeah. So once that happens, so basically your body's like, oh God, there's damage. Let's we'll send some fluid there to do a couple things. One, clean up like you were saying, the cleanup crew, clean up the damaged tissue. So get that crap out of there. And then introduce material to build new tissue, which is the second phase, which is called proliferation. But the whole idea behind the inflammation, because people will ice, right? They go, oh, I hurt my quad. I'm gonna ice my quad. And then the idea is typically for two reasons. Number one, like we said before, it's going to numb pain, which I'll talk about more in a second. I don't know if that's necessarily something we want to do. And then number two is reduce the swelling, right? So, oh no, there's all this fluid and inflammation. I don't want that fluid and inflammation. So I'm going to ice it and it's going to reduce the swelling. Well, like you said, really all that does is delay the healing process because we know we need inflammation. That's like a for sure thing. We need to introduce lymph and we need to introduce blood flow, and then that introduces new material to build and it helps get the old bad material out. So if you're icing, you're reducing the inflammation, but you're kind of just delaying the healing process. So we want that inflammation, but too much is also a bad thing. So now we go, okay, well, we want some inflammation, but not a ton of inflammation. How am I controlling for this? And really now what I think the sort of industry leaders are saying is, can we, through compression, so like squeezing the muscle or through super submaximal contraction, can we help our body sort of like cycle the fluid? Because that's ultimately what we need. We need new fluid in, bad fluid out, new fluid in, bad fluid out. And so this is where like micro contractions, or if you've ever heard of like the Mark Pro, is like this thing that like that like stimulates your muscle and gets it to contract without you like necessarily moving around. But like for me, for example, I woke up this morning and it felt like death, right? Because it sat still for 8 hours. So
did you sleep in this room?
Yeah, I slept in this room.
What did you make of the stairs?
I made a blanket out of spider webs.
Took two of these old fluorescent lights as walking sticks.
Yeah. So woke up, felt terrible. So then I got up early this morning. I went and I walked for 35 minutes. And then, of course, 15 minutes into my walk, starts to feel a little bit better. And then by the end of 35 minutes, I felt great to where I was pretty much walking around without a limp. And then...
Did you have the safeties up when you walked?
Yeah, I had safeties up. I had my walker. And then I had a strength group this morning, and it was a lot of like me just standing and correcting lifts. And then all of a sudden you go up to move around and you're like, oh God, I've gotten stiff again. But, this is like a good thought experiment that if you were just to stay active the whole day and move around, function would be restored. With movement is function. So that's kind of like our goal. Now, I talked a second ago about like icing as a tool to reduce pain. This is another thing that people will be like, well, do we want to reduce pain? Pain has a purpose. Pain is your body telling you, hey, please don't do that anymore. So if we reduce the pain stimulus, then, and we're also trying to like move around, those two things don't really go together. Like we want movement, but we don't want bad.
Do you feel like ice really reduces the pain for you?
I don't, personally.
I don't think it did a whole lot for me. I just think I just did it when I was supposed to do it. And yeah, I don't know. Like maybe sometimes, but as soon as it got warm again, it just seemed like it hurt the same amount. For the most part. And
for me, the last night I took home, we have a hydrocorrelator, which is a machine where you put in this like...
Did you clean that, by the way? Because you definitely have like... I mean,
I had to clean that.
Unspeakable. I know. It had water in it. I didn't realize it had any water in it.
Yeah, we had basically, if you don't know what this is, it's this big metal box that has a coil at the bottom that heats up this water, and in the water are these pads that are filled with, what are those filled with? Because one of them broke open and it was like this weird goo. It was like this gray, like sort of paste kind of stuff.
I think usually it's like a stone, like a powder, like tiny little granules, but some of them have a goo in it. I don't know. Maybe they all have goo. Ours is pretty
old, and I think it was like that, what you said, like that.
I've seen different ones, I think, but yeah. They're magical machines, though. I love them.
Yeah, okay, well, so that's what I was going to get to. So we have one, and we had used it probably not since last winter, and we had it stored up in our loft, and we accidentally left water in it, so it was pretty gross. There was some mold in there. It smelled weird, so I had to do a deep clean, but... yeah, I used that last night and it was awesome. So you just like, it boils up the water. Well, it doesn't boil it. It gets it to like, I think 160, 165 degrees. It heats up the powder in there, and then it stays hot for probably...
Well, it stays hot forever.
Well, the machine stays hot.
The pad, once you take it
20 minutes.
Out,
yeah, 20 minutes, which is like a really good amount of time in terms of... but I remember we had gotten that last winter.
Actually, it was 2 years ago because I got it for... I was trying to give my shoulder like every possible thing I could give it to try to continue my playing career. I was heating up before I'd throw, and it made a huge difference.
Yeah, it was amazing. I used to throw those on my knees before I squatted, and it was like butter. which
sweet butter knees.
Sweet butter knees. So,
well,
okay,
and that also speaks to the power of warming up. Like those things, if you've never seen them, like they're just like a tan pad. They look like they have like a 6-pack almost. Like they're like a long tube. It's like, depending how big the pad is, like 4 or 6 tubes stitched together pretty much. And then you take that out, you put it in this big, like you fold it in half, and it's like terry cloth pad because they're super hot and they'll burn you if you just put it on your skin. Then you put that on your skin, you either wrap it with an ace bandage or you just hold it, which is kind of annoying, but pretty much everyone uses those before games, like in the clubhouse, to get whatever joint is bothering them. So I'm sure Jose Altuve had both of those on his, he only has one wrecked knee, but I'm sure all those guys have them because it just shortens the warm-up process, and it just makes such a big difference. And the heat and the warmth, or the wet heat, is what really helps drive it into your skin and like get it deep. There's like no comparison to like an over-the-counter, plug-in heat pack or any of that stuff. There's just like literally no comparison because they're wet because they're in the thing, and then you're making you sweat. So it's just a combination. It's just like a really moist environment. And those things just get your arm ready to go. So a lot of relievers will walk into the clubhouse if they're like a 7th, 8th inning guy, and they'll get one, they'll wrap it on, they'll walk back out to the bullpen, and they'll just sit there with their jacket on with the heat pad on. I would do that when I was hurting. And I just sit there, and now when my name gets called, I take it off. My arm is like, the skin's red. It's like legit hot. And now my warm-up is way shortened. And if you do that in conjunction with a regular warm-up, it's even better. Like you said, your knees felt like amazing with that stuff. And that just, again, it's an artificial means of warming up, but it's also a testament to the fact that warming up does make your joints feel better. So then the question is, could you produce that same quality of warm-up from actually warming up without, the pad? So anyway.
And I think that, that's just like, if you look at it really simply, if we want functional tissues, we want our tissues to do what they're supposed to do, the warmer they are, the better. And so it's like, and that's why I don't practice what I preach very often, but
warming up sucks. It's stupid. It's really stupid and boring.
It's so boring and stupid. And I like when you're busy.
Heat pads are great.
Yeah, when you're busy and you have an hour or 45 minutes to work out, you don't want to spend 15 minutes of it warming up. But I need one of these every once in a while to remind myself why I warm up. But and so I kind of like to maybe summarize the treatment process. So if I had a kid and they tweaked their hamstring, they're running like a 40 or something, they pulled their hamstring.
What's the kid's name?
Jacques.
All right, Jacques. Jacques running a 40 and he tweaks his hamstring.
I don't know what's Jacques as a French name.
How does a Frenchman like?
Jacques like this.
Okay, sorry. If you're French, I apologize.
So and they were like, okay, what do I do? The right after the injury, and this is the other thing that you'll say or you'll notice is, let's say you roll your ankle in a basketball game. You can still, like, as long as you're staying on the court, you can still like move around. But as soon as you come out of the game and you sit and then you try to get back up, that's when you feel like death. So if they're still like moving around, that's like the best thing to like be increasing the blood flow through the system. But okay, let's say, ow, it's the next day. What am I doing? The first thing that I would do if I were me, or what I'm trying to do now, is find out ways that I can use the muscle without it being painful. So for me right now, what that is walking. Walking super low load, super low intensity, but the whole time your quad's contracting. And in doing that, imagine you had like a water balloon, and you like, it was full of water and you squeezed it and you let go. You squeezed it and you let go. That's like pumping essentially fluid in and out of the muscle tissue, which is what I want right now. On top of that, like right now, I'm wearing an ACE compression bandage. So it's squeezing the muscle so that as I'm walking and that muscle contracts and it gets tight, the compression sleeve expands, and then when I relax, the compression sleeve kind of sucks back in. So it just kind of adds to that like pumping effect. So movement without pain is great. And even if that's, like I said, like super low intensity, or I know if you have access, if you go to like a physical therapist, you have access to something where they can do electric stimulation or do massage. Some people will do massage. All that stuff works. But contraction and then compression, and then outside of that, like I'm not going to ice. I'm going to keep adding movement as this allows. And right now I'm just on essentially my body's clock. So I'm going to be doing contractions as often as possible and throughout the day. And then over time, as I'm pumping fluid in and out, all that tissue starts to repair. Oh, by the way, the last phase, so you have inflammation, then you have proliferation. The last one's called remodeling. which is that's when you start to build new tissue. And the biggest thing there, and this is the other thing I want to talk about, is nutrition, and that is making sure that you're supplying your body with enough material to rebuild with. So despite the fact that I'm not going to be able to work out like I want to, so I'm probably not going to be able to do squats and lunges for a little bit, I'm not going to reduce my carb intake because I know that I'll need that to rebuild tissue. Fats are also really good when you're injured because they help with anti-inflammation, so they help keep the inflammation down as opposed to like cookies and 7x7s and 7 and 7s.
There's been no studies on this.
Yeah,
This anecdotal.
That's anecdotal. I apologize.
That out of here.
So yeah, that's what I would say. And now, like ice, kind of over it. Me personally, now like ultimately, if some kid just thinks that ice is the greatest thing, or they have a doctor that says ice is the greatest thing, then it's like okay. But
I mean, you can take any placebo you want. You know, like it's a placebo essentially.
That's the other thing. So people ask about NSAIDs or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which also kind of the same thing as icing. Like they serve to thin your blood, reduce the swelling, but is that something we want? Not necessarily. We like inflammation early because that's the whole process of healing. Now, what you don't want to do is be completely sedentary. So like my nightmare would be to like go home and sit and put my foot up for the next 6 hours, because then you're going to get fluid collecting in the system, but there's going to be no flushing going on. So my heart rate's going to be low. There's going to be no contraction. So all that fluid is just going to sit there. And that's not what we want. We want to be cycling the system through. So that's where movement plays a big role. But like you weren't a big...
That's your nightmare?
Were you a big...
My nightmare is getting
chased by a
like thrown like into like a barrel of acid, but only like halfway.
What was your like? Talk us through your experience with NSAIDs.
Oh, I would eat them like candy.
Yeah, pop them like.
But this is, I mean, that's one of those things that it wasn't something. There's a lot of different circumstances for a lot of different things.
Right.
So for me, my very first year of pro baseball, I like got the chance that I had won my whole life, and like 3 starts in, I have a journal entry that's going to be in my book that I had like the most painful game of long toss in my entire life. And I'm like, dear God, how am I going to make it 100 more innings like this? Like my arm was shaking. It was throbbing. It just felt absolutely atrocious.
First couple weeks of the season?
Third, it was after my second start.
Yeah.
And I was like in this brand new ballpark. It was at Southern Illinois. And I'm like, how am I going to pitch in 2 days with my arm feeling like this? Like, you know, I had surgery. It had a tear. It felt worse than all of that. And so I started taking Advil, and I took 12 a day for the next 100 days.
Not advisable.
Not advisable. I wouldn't tell other people to do that, but there was no other choice for me at that point. I wasn't going to go on. I wasn't going to say, hey, coach, I know I just got the chance of a lifetime. I can't pitch because my arm doesn't feel good. Well, you'd be like, well, do you need to go to the surgeon? Like, do you need surgery? Are you injured? It wasn't clear that I was injured. It just felt horrendous, and I couldn't throw as hard. But when I took all my Advil, I could pitch, and I did it the whole season. And my arm felt literally miserable every day. So,
and I know
it numbed the pain. I don't know that it healed me, but it definitely numbed the pain where I could pitch.
And I think that's the sad part is you did that as a necessity to like keep your job. And I know you've mentioned before that like you're also not alone in that category. Like a lot of guys are just like hiding the pain, like drugging up to reduce the pain just so they can keep playing.
Yeah, and that's typical, and that's an informed decision you can make with your own body. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's other things like I think I mentioned this on our other, I don't know. I've mentioned a lot of stuff, a lot of places, but my second to last season, I was like really hurting, and it stayed with me the rest of the year. But my buddy was like, just do a cycle of HGH. He's like, just do it 1 month. He's like, it'll fix you right up. Like no one will ever know. Like you probably won't get tested during that period, but just do a month of HGH and then, you'll be done. I'm like, no, because I don't want to mess with my hormones. Like I would never, I know HGH is probably the safest of all of them or whatever, but I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to taint my life's work of being a reputed, like hardworking guy who's come back from injury, who's done all this stuff like the right way. I'm not going to have any chance of being caught doing something like that would ruin it all.
Just tarnish it all.
Yeah. I would never do that. But like stuff like that, people do, they'll like go on steroids or HGH for a short period of time to like give their injury like steroids to heal faster. And that's the thing people do.
Can you talk about? I always liked the story you told about cortisol. Your cortisol shot. What that felt like.
Yeah, I got a cortisone shot because in my third year, I was going to be the opening day starter. It was off a miserable winter or miserable previous season. And, you know, it was like I did a lot of work. I started meditating in the winter. There was a lot of build up to me being like potentially the opening day starter for this team. You know, I got released and picked up by this new one. And so I like really wanted, I was throwing well in spring training, and then my elbow got barky, and they said, you know, it looks very surface. We think it's just tendonitis. You know, we can give you a cortisone shot if you want. I'd heard about them, and guys have described them like that they're just magic. And I'm like, that just can't be that way. Like, I've had elbow pain my whole life. It can't just like, they can't just inject it and it's gone. Like, it hurts too much for it to be like that. But, you know, I'm sitting there. It's not like a big deal, but I'm just watching him. He's got this big tube full of like really like silvery, like ivory goo. And he just like sticks it under my skin and then just squirts and it like puffs up because you can see the goo go in. And it just like literally, it was as if he was injecting ice water on top of a fire and just like went out. He just like did it in like 3 or 4 sites, and it just like, and then I just moved it around. Like, so as soon as he injected, it went from like an 8 to like a 2. And then as soon as I moved it around, it went to a 0. I was like, that can't be legal. Like, how is that a thing? And then it was fine until it wore off. And then when it wore off, I had a torn elbow. So,
yeah.
So it was masking something, you know, it was masking. I don't know if it was, I don't think my elbow ligament was torn at that point. I think it tore over the next 6 weeks when I pitched on it. I don't know for sure, but it definitely allowed me to keep pitching through it. And there were definitely signs that stuff was wrong underneath it because my velocity in previous years never dropped. The previous season, I had hit 93 in the 9th inning on like my 115th pitch of a complete game. And after I got my cortisone shot, like I still have a couple photos of my my velocities by inning from the charts, and it was like I top 93 in the first inning, top 92 in the second inning, top 90 in the third inning. Then it's like 89, and then by the end of the game, there's like 87s. Like, I haven't seen 87 since college. Like, that's not normal, and it kind of kept that same pattern. I'd fluctuate. I'd hold in the 90s a little longer, a little shorter someday, but that was another thing that was just like buying me time. You know, and if I had stayed off it, if I had just like not pitched and gotten the cortisone shot and then rehabbed, it probably would have been fine. I would have done great because it really flushed the inflammation out. But, you know, in that circumstance where I'm just like masking it, you're putting makeup on a
pig.
Yeah, you're putting makeup. That's what I was looking for. You know, it was just all right. Still just traumatizing the tissue. So
yeah, and that's like all those kind of things, and that's what's. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned before, you just like do those things by necessity, but the cortisone is just scary for that reason, that it kind of just hides the problem. And it's, I know I've heard of lots, like cortisones get handed out pretty liberally, it seems like.
Yeah.
I'm just curious I want to feel one, because I remember you talking about how like you could almost feel it like spread out. Like,
I could. Yeah,
like,
you could feel it
like,
diffuse.
Like it's like I think you just said a second ago. It was like throwing some ice water on smoldering ashes. Like, that's crazy.
Well, because obviously it wouldn't like stay, because you like slips under the skin and it shot up like a big blister, and then it had to go somewhere. It wasn't just going to stay there.
So instant and tangible.
That's crazy. It was crazy.
Like, you're like, do it on my whole body.
Yeah, but and then the other thing I got, and I had taken like every NSAID, you know, I sort of hoarded them over time, but I got Toradol to make my second All-Star appearance, because I was like, I'll be damned if I miss this one. And Toradol is probably what Jose Altuve was on. Complete guess, but that's what they give. They told me that like that's what they give NFL players to like play with a torn ACL. That's what they like. It's like the most potent thing they can give you, pretty much. It's like a 7-day pack, or 3-day pack, and then you keep taking them. But Toradol is like super potent, and it's a steroid pack, like a corticosteroid. And I took that to make my All-Star game appearance, and that worked pretty well. But even then, that wore off in 4 weeks or whatever, 6 weeks, and so I got in the gamut of them, because I was like, I have a pretty high pain tolerance, and I have a pretty lower high sensitivity. Like, most NSAIDs don't do anything for me. Like ibuprofen, until I take a ton of it. Yeah, I'm just trying to max out, but a lot of them just like don't have much of an effect. So I kind of mixed and matched, but Toradol was good.
And then we've talked about icing. What are your thoughts on ice baths and contrast baths?
Have you done an ice bath yet in your life?
I've done ice. I've not done contrast.
I like them, and it's interesting because the research is unclear, but I know a lot of basketball players do them because they needed need something to like recover. They need conditioning, quote unquote, but they run up and down the field, down the court all the game. So a lot of basketball players use contrast baths as their way to like elevate and depress their heart rate.
So, and I think this is kind of where I would offer the distinction between, like, when someone does an ice bath, it's not, at least in my mind, it's not like someone icing an injury. It's not to like reduce swelling or any of that kind of stuff necessarily. It's and then if you don't know what a contrast bath is, it's hopping back and forth between an ice bath and then like a hot tub. And so, like you're saying, it's a way to, your heart rate goes crazy, and because you're dropping your body temp, spiking it, dropping it, spiking it, dropping it, spiking it. So it's a way to almost condition and to get this whole idea that we're talking about,
the pumping effect.
The pumping effect.
Yeah.
And so, and I know a lot of people like swear by him, and I enjoyed. Well, I shouldn't say that. Ice baths feel great after you're done with them. Like in the process, in the act, they're not necessarily the greatest thing ever. But I really want to do contrast, because I know like Brian Shaw swears by him. A lot of high level athletes just like love them.
Yeah, I liked it. I had a teammate who did it. He learned him with the Padres when he was a bullpen mate of Trevor Hoffman. That was like one of the things Trevor Hoffman did religiously. So he was like telling us all the ways of it, and I was hurting, so I was like, I'll try anything. So we did that pretty consistently. I did it most days, not every day, because on the one season we didn't have like two baths right next to each other, so we had to like make our own ice bath in the shower, which was really labor intensive, and then run to the training room. So it was like this kind of a thing. But then with Long Island the next year, I could just hop from one tub to the next. But you typically do 3 minutes and 2 minutes, or 3 minutes and 3 minutes, or something like that, and you do it like it feels like you did a really long yoga session when you're done after just like 14-15 minutes, where you're just like very melty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I felt there was some effect. I don't know what it was, but I was trying to give my body any chance to feel better and recover.
And I know now, I was watching a documentary on Man City, the soccer team, and they have, I mean, these are organizations like European soccer. These are organizations that pour millions of dollars into like performance study and like recovery methods. And now they have chambers that you basically just like step in, and it sucks the temp down to like something crazy, like negative something weird, and you're in there for like a couple minutes and then you step out. So rather than getting in water and ice, you just go into like this chamber that is freezing.
See, I'm skeptical of a lot of that, and I'm skeptical even of ice baths, even despite doing them, because your body protects itself. It's not like, like you put ice on your skin, your body's then pumping more blood underneath it to like keep your tissues from dying. You know what I mean? So when you're in an ice bath, it's not like your body's just going to let your deep muscle wounds get cold because they die. That's not how your body works.
I think that's why, in my mind, they're more for heart and conditioning rather than like tissue health. Almost, if that makes sense.
And that's why I'm skeptical of the really cold rooms and the cryotherapy. Like, I don't understand how that surface level cold is going to penetrate your body in any like legitimate way in a couple minutes. Like, that's what I just don't understand, because again,
like, you need the moisture, you're saying?
Huh?
You like the moisture?
No, I just in general, like, I think the moisture helps probably get heat deeper, but your body just regulates its internal temperature. Like, you can't be in a 120 or a negative 120 room for very long if it's actually penetrating to your body, because you'll just get hypothermia.
Yeah, but I think that's part of it, is like in the act of maintaining like homeostasis, your heart works harder, your lungs maybe work a little bit harder, and then like the actual tissue itself, sort of like capillaries and that kind of stuff, those work harder to maintain that homeostasis. And then like maybe you flip over to a hot tub, and now everything kind of chills out, almost like doing HIIT intervals for your heart or your tissues almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd really like to try contrast. I've never done it.
Yeah, I personally, everyone's different, and my buddy used an analogy of like some people are dragons and some people are something else, but I feel like I was going to die when I'm in a hot tub. Like, my body does not handle hot well, and I handle cold pretty well. So I enjoyed, you always dread getting in the ice bath because it's just like those first 20 seconds are just miserable. But then when you when you like get past that initial shock where you're like kind of heaving for air and you're like really uncomfortable, you have this single layer of cold sensation that just uniform over your entire body, and you try not to move, because if you move your feet around and like move the water, it pushes new cold. It's miserable. So you try to stay perfectly still, but you have this uniform layer of just cold sensation over your body, and it's very meditative, and that's what I kind of appreciated. It was just like it's like just a break from real life. Whereas when I'm in the hot tub, I mean, I just felt like my heart is just hurting, and I'm just like, I don't know, the heat just really negatively affected me. But it's part of the process.
Yeah.
I couldn't spend 10 minutes in a hot tub like someone else could. It makes me want to die.
So 2 things. Number 1, that's what I was getting ready to say. Consult your physician, but everyone should try an ice bath because I think it's a mental challenge more than anything. Like, can you, like you're saying, there's a certain piece you have to find where you're like, I hate this, but you just kind of have to like control your breathing and just chill out. Whereas a lot of people, I don't think, can handle it for. How long would you usually do an ice bath for? If you were just doing an ice, not contrast.
Depends if I was trying to be like real tough, but no more than like 12.
Yeah,
usually more like 8 probably.
I would do like 8 to 10.
Yeah. After you're in there, it's like once you're in and that like you're past that initial shock, like the 30 to 60 seconds, and you hit that sort of like meditative state, the next bunch of minutes aren't that important. You get kind of bored and it's like whatever, but then you do hit a second point where you start to get cold.
Mm-hmm.
So between the shock wearing off and then where you get cold, that's fine. But then there's a period where you're like,
I also like the visual of, you're saying you have to stay really still, almost like your body heat's like warming the layer of water molecules.
Well, it does do that. And
then as soon as you move, it's all gone.
That's exactly what happens. That's why you don't want to move the water.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there in my compression shorts, just like whatever my stance is. I'm just like.
It reminds me of the time. It reminds me of the time that
I know exactly what you're about to say.
We're on this lift. We were changing the lights in our facility.
I don't know how you're that comfortable with it.
And we're on this very rickety lift. And it's like swaying back and forth as we're up kind of like 30 feet in the air in our facility. And we're changing the lights. And we're kind of up there standing around. And I was like, wait, what are we doing? Dan was holding onto the sides of the lift. He goes, besides standing incredibly still. And I thought that was the funniest thing ever. Okay, but then my another question was for you was, you said you don't really like hot tubs. How do you feel about saunas? Do you ever do that much? And do you hate them?
Do you want to hear my weird sauna story?
Oh God, I don't know.
This is gonna start off sounding really weird, but I went to a pro baseball tryout in Florida, in Miami, with a friend, and we were in this like kind of shady hotel. Actually, it was kind of nice, but it was like small, like boutique, like easily could have been like murdered in there or whatever.
Right.
There was like another group of guys, and they're just like really friendly to us, and they were like our age, and they were like, hey, like we're going out a bunch, like we're really familiar with Miami, like do you guys want to hang out with us? We're like, okay, I don't really know why you're taking interest in us, but sure, like whatever. So we like kind of like that day, and one of the guys' name was Oleg. He was like full-blooded Russian or whatever, and he's like, we're going to this Russian bathhouse tomorrow, or Turkish bathhouse. And like you guys should definitely come. Like it's gonna be awesome. Like I love these things. Like it's part of like our culture. You should come. And I say that is weird because that's like, you know, everyone's is so guarded these days,
right.
And like,
well, and to be fair, that's like a.
But they were just like like they had no ulterior motive. They weren't trying to date us. Like, well, it was just like there was nothing.
Cultural breakdown there, whereas it's like they're probably like, yeah, dog, just like come to the bathhouse, and you're like, wait, what? Like,
yeah,
a strange thing for a stranger to ask.
But either way, they like took us around town a bunch. They're both from Chicago. I think it was 2 of them, maybe a third. But anyway, we go to this bathhouse, and you pay like $20, and you go with your bathing suit or whatever. And there was just like. It was like literally like a labyrinth underneath some weird Miami hotel. And there were all these different rooms. And he was just like taking us from one to the next. He was like showing us the ropes. He's like, okay, so we're going to sit in this one for 5 minutes. Then we're going to go over here. So there was like a aromatherapy room where it's like a sauna, but it's like filled with like, oils and stuff. Yeah. And it was kind of hard to breathe. And there's like tons of just like regular places you can hang out and like just baths with like a whatever. There's like a infrared room. There was like just like really cold room. There were lots of different, like tons of them. But anyway, like the one I remember the most was there was a super hot room where it was scaffolding, like scaffolded seating. I don't know if that's the right way to say, but like the dugout seating.
Oh, okay. Like
where you can sit like here, and you can climb up, you can sit a little higher, then you can climb up. So he's like, all right, we're going to go in here. It's going to be really hot. It was like, honestly, probably like 140 degrees or something at the top. Nice. He's like, we're going to go in here, and then we're going to go into this super cold tub afterwards. So we like go in there, and he's like, we're going to the top. So we sit at the top. Or no, we sat at the bottom. Because he's like, all right, I know you guys like are struggling with this. and we're like sitting there like literally dying. I'm like feeling the skin like melt off my face. I felt like I was Arnold Schwarzenegger in the last scene of Total Recall. I was like, like I felt, and then the problem was we're like, dude, we got to go. I'm like, I got to get out of here. Like I can't. He's like, nope, you're gonna stay. Like we got a couple more minutes. Just like just stay. And he made us like really wear it. And then the thing was,
was there a significant difference like on the step ups? Like you were like,
wait till the end of the story.
Okay.
So when it was he's like, finally like, okay, we can go. I stand up and my head goes up, like 3 more feet into like another layer of hotness. And I literally felt my skin was going to melt off. And then I go up, I'm like, oh my God. And just like run out. He's like, all right. Then you like jump in this tub. He's like, you're going to like plunge up and down 3 or 4 times. And you just like do this. So you're like immediately like as hot as I'd ever been. And then I plunged in this like ice bath, like a bunch of different times. And we went and sat in this cold room right after. And it was like really intense, like crazy experience. Just like going from hot to cold to hot to cold to hot to cold. That's kind of what we did the whole time for like 2 hours. And afterwards you just like feel like you're going to like, we were walking around like a jellyfish on the streets. But it was a really interesting experience. I don't know how you like find that if you're not aware that they exist or anything like that.
Yeah,
like
it seems very.
But it was an interesting experience. I'm sure all of us have heard like weird things happen in bathhouses, but it was like there was like no one really there, and it was just really interesting. I mean, it seemed like people must do it because there was like kind of high tech, and there was a lot of rooms, and there was just like really interesting. I think it was like $20 or $30.
But I mean, like the overhead of heating and cooling all those rooms seems like a lot.
Yeah.
So it had to have been in demand.
Yeah, it was interesting. But anyway, that was my...
So pro sauna?
No, I hate it. No, I hate it. No, not into it.
Yeah. I'm also not
the heat. So I'm not...
It's tough. Yeah.
No.
Okay, well, that was what I wanted to cover on...
what's your plan this week with your leg? Continue walking?
Yep, I'm just going to walk around a lot. I'm hoping tomorrow to be able to hop on the rowing machine. But yeah, so we'll just kind of play it by ear, and I'm going to leave it alone today, keep it compressed, walk around a bunch, and then tomorrow I might try to get in there with some soft tissue work. So smash it around a little bit, see if I can break up whatever is in there. But right now I'm just kind of letting pain dictate how fast I'm moving. Because like, obviously I want to get back to working out or squatting and lunging as early as possible, but I also don't want to deal with this for a month. I want to deal with it for 2 weeks. So that's the plan.
Yep.
A lot of upper body stuff. We'll be working on back, buys, and tries for this week.
So you're doing anything different nutritionally? You're taking supplements, anything to speed?
So that's the other thing. So
we kind of glazed over that.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of the stuff that you don't want to eat when you're injured, I don't eat anyway, which are like your like starchy breads and trans fats and that kind of stuff. So the biggest thing is what I would normally do is, given that I'm not working out as much, I would reduce my carb intake, but I'm not going to, just because I know that I want to be supplying my body with stuff to work with. So I'm going to be really not changing too much in terms of carb intake, protein intake, fat intake. I'm going to make sure that I'm getting nuts and fish oil and other fats, olive oil, just to kind of help, like if there is any excess inflammation, to reduce it. But nutritionally, not much is going to change. And then in terms of workouts, like just going to be upper body focused, and then I'm just trying to walk right now as much as possible. And then compressing as often as possible. And that's pretty much it. Water and sodium, which are, you asked about supplements. That's what I was going to talk about. In terms of supplementation, they'll recommend fish oil, obviously, as one, just because of the omega-3 fatty acid content of fish oil. Vitamin C, I think, is recommended when you're injured. Vitamin D, which I supplement with vitamin D anyway, because as you're well aware, the sun doesn't come out very much anymore. So that really doesn't change too much for me anyway. I also supplement with vitamin C, so that doesn't really change. So a lot of the stuff that I already do, I'm just going to maintain. But yeah, my supplements right now are just vitamin D, vitamin C, fish oil, which I take daily, and then I'll do caffeine around a workout, like 200 milligrams, something like that. That's pretty much it.
You could do one of these.
I know.
It's got carbs.
It's got carbs.
13 grams. Only 4 grams added.
Yeah, and it's
7 grams of protein.
It's not a terrible
4 grams of fat.
Workout drink, to be honest.
Reduced fat milk, cold pressed coffee, cane sugar, chicory root fiber, acacia gum, sodium, lactase, vitamin D3, because this is not lactose-free milk in here.
I mean,
pretty solid little beverage.
You read
pretty
that
solid
list of
little
ingredients,
beverage.
and a lot of those things you want around a workout, so not terrible. Yeah, I might have to go grab some of those.
All right, this was Twinsies.
See ya.